So, finally in 3.6, I decided to take the Hammerhead out. I decided to fly it out of Area 18. I've been testing out this hover mode thing more and more, getting used to it. And I figured this would probably be one of the more challenging ships to try and fly out of one of these locations. And of course, the cockpit being located underneath the ship necessitated the use of, the third-person camera just to leave the docking bay. But I kind of wanted to revisit the ship and see how it handled, and I was pleasantly surprised. My expectation up front was that this ship was going to handle rather sloppily. It was going to be kind of drifting this way and that, and it was going to be somewhat of a struggle, at the very least, to land it, to maneuver it through, some of the difficult features that some of these landing sites have. And my first experiment really was just picking up a package at Area 18, flying it out to a moon by Hurston, landing, delivering it. Let's see how that goes. Not exactly setting a very high bar, but, at the very beginning, just taking off from the planet. I have to admit that in the past, taking off with this ship from Lorville, things like that, getting up into orbit was slow. It was not great. And I'm not sure if the current implementation is intended or if it's a bug. But as you can see, I'm very slowly, pulling up the landing gear. I'm very slowly taking off. But the handling is very crisp. It's very, very tight. It isn't sloppy. The ship isn't wobbling this way, wavering off that way. It's a very crisp handling ship, and I did not expect this. I expected something to be at least to be very much more a struggle to get this ship up into orbit. Doesn't really have the vertical thrusters that a much more substantial ship like the Reclaimer does, and I was frankly expecting this to be something of a punishing experience, but as I transitioned into normal flight and began to kind of take off, the ship just took right off. And in fact, flying it into orbit was, it was nothing like flying a Reclaimer into orbit. It was more like flying a Freelancer into orbit, or a ship of that size, or maybe something like a Connie. Once you were up in the air just even a little bit, you are able, as you can see, I'm transitioning now into normal flight, and she just rips up into the atmosphere. And this was a surprisingly short ascent into orbit and to be able to quantum around the system. I was pleasantly surprised by that. I've taken the audio out of this video because this was, while I was playing with other Scum members and we were all having conversations, and maybe they don't want all of, everything that we say broadcasted out there. And since I didn't tell anybody I was recording, I just kind of decided, I'll just remove the audio from it. But I was basically telling them, it's like, holy shit, this thing flies great. This thing flies amazing. There's a lot of things, I think, when you first get into a patch like this that you look at and you go, I wish that wasn't that way, or, I wish they hadn't done this. But this was a very pleasant surprise. And credit where credit's due. This has kind of pushed the stock of the Hammerhead up, in my opinion. There's some inconveniences. There's some things that I don't like about the Hammerhead. Been more than vocal about that. But, as we kind of begin to dip our toes into the reality of what Star Citizen is becoming, I think that the Hammerhead is a pretty good ship in certain respects. There are other things about it that I don't like. The lack of proper weapon storage is a big one. But for getting around the universe, for doing things with your friends, if you just want to go out and reply to, emergency messages and defend ships and make money that way. Once we get in mission sharing and reward sharing and things like that in the game, I could see this being a very positive revenue generator for those more military oriented players. That, coupled with the ability to navigate around the system several times before needing a quantum refuel, things like that, I think that this is going to end up being a pretty darn good ship. Wouldn't mind the addition of a couple of weapon racks, mind you, but overall, if you're looking for straight up military, action, but not quite at the fighter level, maybe a couple of rungs up the ladder up above that, I think this is a pretty damn good ship. Now, pretty much as long as this channel's been here, there has been a point that I've brought up time and time again in regards to ships, and it has to do with the size of ships and the range that they can travel. I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but when I want to play a space game, I don't really want to be playing just in the Stanton system. I want to be playing in other star systems. I mean, there's plenty of star systems in the Star Citizen universe. I mean, let's just think of one off the top of our head for no particular reason. I don't know, Nyx. Right nearby Stanton, not very remarkable as far as the star system goes. Only a couple of planets. One of them looks more like a Venus, and the other one looks like it's been mined to death. But a whole lot of jump points bridge off of that system. Be a hell of a jump off point for the universe. And when you look at that as a potential future site, thanks Lando, for our travels, it kind of reinforces the point that maybe you want a ship that's like this, a ship that has more range, a ship that can travel far greater distances. And that's really been one of the driving factors that's kind of moved me away from fighters, has been the idea that I kind of want to explore the Star Citizen universe, and when I look at the inconveniences that come with traveling in much smaller fighters versus traveling in a much larger ship, I mean, you can see how a Hammerhead could easily make the journey from one star system to another, whereas a smaller ship might desperately struggle to make that trip depending on where the jump points are located in the star system, how far they are from the existing planets. It could be a big problem for those ships. And so when I look at larger ships like the Hammerhead, even though, I do have certain issues with the Hammerhead, I think that the opportunities that a ship like this, or a ship like the Polaris, or the Hull D, or the Starfarer, or the Caterpillar, the opportunities that those ships open up in terms of gameplay, in terms of possible revenue for players, is pretty amazing. And for the longest time, we've been playing the game in these very limited arenas. Back when Arena Commander was the only taste of ship-to-ship combat that we ever had, and people were making these broad generalizations and making all these statements about this ship needs to be changed, that ship needs to be changed because it's unbalanced, it's overpowered. And I would always counter that with, you're using a whole bunch of ships trapped in a little fishbowl of a play area, and you're trying to use that to justify these broad statements about their viability and their usability in combat. And I said it's completely false reasoning. And when we got to a larger play area in 2.0 and beyond, a lot of people were once again doing this, and they were making kind of these hilarious statements about, oh, this ship's going to be good for this ship's going to be good for that. But now that we now that we've gotten to a point where we're now contemplating travel between star systems, I think this kind of reinforces and drives home the point that it's going to be ships like this that I think are going to be carrying players in groups into the future. And I think there's going to be a point where a lot of players who are in orgs, maybe they don't own a ship like this, but their org leader does, or one of their friends do, they're probably going to end up crewing these ships with those players and going along on the journey with them, potentially seeing much greater revenue for themselves, and maybe one day allowing themselves to progress into ships like this. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the community develops once the ability to travel between star systems becomes a real thing. I want to see how the community responds to that new development, to that next big leap in terms of playable area. Hopefully we'll hear something about this very, very soon. Like CitizenCon maybe? I don't know. We'll see. But definitely interesting times ahead. And ships like the Hammerhead and other big ships, I think, are going to be very valuable in the future.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.